It was late in the night. The foggy tree line around the open field eerily glows under the strong moonlight. The occasional chirp from the owl will make his presence known under the starlight. It is indeed a peaceful night, for now. Beneath the trees, a small foxhole sits embedded into the soil. A man in his late prime sits next to a large weapon emplacement, smoking down the last of the dog's end he picked up earlier from the sandbag used as an ashtray. He checks his pocket watch before humming a song. Above the clock's hand, marking the time as 12:07, is a small picture of a young blonde woman. The photo is faded, and mute of all color, but it still shakes him when he sees it. He closes it with a snap and takes another quick drag before his smoke burns down to nothing. A ruffling noise is heard behind him as the flaps to a deeper compartment leading to sleeping quarters are moved briskly off to the side. Another man, this one much younger, steps out with his gray uniform shining under the moonlight. "Erika, we used to sing that back in training underneath," the lad says to his superior, noticing the pocket watch dangling from his clenched fist. "Eh, don't worry, you'll see her soon enough. The war won't last forever. The Americans have already sieged their way through the Ardennes. Only a matter of time until they get here. We only have to slow them down long enough for the medivac to extract the wounded. We'll be fine." The lad takes a seat next to him and opens a new box of smokes. Pulling a cancer stick from the carton, he glances over at his senior, who is staring at the ground deep in thought. "Hello, Herr Johannes. Are you going to be okay over there? Here, have another one." The lad pulls a lighter from his breast pocket and flings it open. "Don't. Hold the lighter, so you don't give us away, would you?" Forgetting he's in a war zone, the kid lowers the lighter and does as commanded before handing the smoke to his officer. "Danke. Ja, Commandant, the Americans. You think they can be reasoned with? I mean, after..." Johannes looks over at him with a stoic look. "Friedrich, the Americans blame us for all their problems. It's a good thing it's just you and me in this trench. What you say is treason to the Reich." "Yeah, but surely you want to be done with the fighting. The war is clearly at its end, and all we can do is hope the less fortunate before throwing in the cards." They both sat in silence for a few moments. "You know, there's nothing else in this world I'd rather have than to go back home and ask Marie out. Come back home, safe in uniform, would certainly get my foot in the door. Certainly she thinks me dead or a deserter at this point. She knew that once the British invaded France, that when I was called up I didn't want to go. What am I to do though? Look, as soon as the war is over, you'll have your chance. You served your fatherland well, but I took your own safety into an account. You did what was necessary to protect the innocent, then turned over your rank to save yourself before being overrun. Some may see it as cowardice, but it beats dying for the losing side. Yeah, you sure we have enough ammo?" His words are cut off as by the sound of running feet and rustling grass behind them in the trees. As Friedrich turns around, he finds a messenger sliding down the hole with a wet slump as the melted snow puddle kicks up, coating his entire coat. The man's satchel is ragged and slightly torn from the trees, but is still holding up as he reaches in and grabs several envelopes. "Letters from the fatherland. Also orders for the mail vehicle in full swing. We have another 2.5 hours until we are out of the fray, and then we pull out." The messenger quickly attempts to crawl out of the trench to the next line before Friedrich grabs his arm. "You wouldn't have any chocolate on you, would you? My last ration I gave to a kid back in town before pulling out." The messenger gives a look of confusion as Johannes gives a slight smirk. Luke, I'm just a messenger. I hand out bad news and good. You're in luck, though. He fishes through his rucksack and pulls out a half-eaten ration and takes out a chocolate bar and snaps a half of it off. I tend to sweat in my sleep at night, so I've been cutting back on the sugars. Besides, you two here on the front, you need it more than me. Now I must get going. Stay safe, comrade, shush. Both the men in the trench, almost in sync, respond back with opposing levels of enthusiasm. Yeah, shush. Johannes still stands there, taking drags, staring at the puddle under him, looking at his reflection, pondering what has become of him since his conscription. Yeah, read this. I'm not in the mood to try to focus on reading, just quite if you see any photos or anything. The girl back home can be quite a tease during the war. Haas chuckles, holding out his mail. Taking the package and unfolding a letter, Friedrich shifts over to the sleeping area where the lanterns are still lit. Johannes, it has been quite the many number of months since you left home. Just 2 more weeks since my writing of this, and you would have been gone for 2 years. At least the Amerikaners and the British are sophisticated. Word keeps coming in from the Ostfront, and the Russian barbarism is a horrible thought to imagine you in. The winter, the killing. I hope you are safe. I worry all the time, but the other girls keep thinking that I'm lacking. I spend more time worrying than I am producing children for the Reich. All these boys who dream of being old enough to join keep attempting to swoon me over, speaking of their brothers in the war and how much better they will be. All I can do is tell them about you and how my soon-to-be first sergeant would be coming home. The family is well too, and they wish you well. The rationing is becoming a bit excessive, but if what you say and the news is true, then every little bit is just all the more necessary. Gunther is doing well also. He chased down a few rabbits yesterday, and I had to get him off of them. Definitely your happy-go-lucky pup that you've left behind. Derek is also about to get out of school. Your parents are talking about throwing him a graduation party, but they are scared that he will be conscripted before they can do so. I hope this war ends soon so he doesn't have to see what you had. I hope you come home soon. Love you, Danica. Frederick folds the paper over and hands it to Johannes, who opens it quickly to peer at her handwriting, noticing that her lipstick stain covers the corner. Just like all the other letters, he mutters to himself, folding the paper and putting it in his pocket. Du lucky man. I wish I had a woman like that waiting for me back home. And what do you mean by that? You do. You're just too chicken shit to ask her out. Yes, but that's not guaranteed. I do have a woman that loves you and writes you. All I get is the occasional letter from a school asking questions about how the mighty war machine is. The thought of having to answer a letter to school children and lying about the situation to protect their ears from the horrors of all of this, it's rough. You have a girl to keep your spirits up. Johannes smirks. Yeah, and you got your chocolate bar to keep you happy. So what's the problem? I was think a crack rings out as a tree limb snaps over their heads. They duck down behind their makeshift fortification. Friedrich dives into cover with a loud thud. Johannes, unlike Friedrich, stands idly before, lazily slumping over his machine gun, clearing the chamber for a fresh feed. Friedrich just to his left, feeding the ammo into the gun, with his rifle sitting beside him. He trembles, looking at the cold determination of Johannes. Want to know a ghost story, kid? He says in a moment of silence, scanning for the enemy. Right now? Yeah, better than sitting in silence. As they scan the field in front of them, they see a flare shoot out overhead. The glow bursts a large red, and the field before them glows in the red tint. The night around them turns to a hellish landscape, as if autumn lasted too long, with a blood-red tint. The last man to use this gun only survived 10 seconds after firing his first burst. Jesus. Why would you tell me that? Johannes smirks before handing him the cigarette. Because I'm about to beat that poor bastard's record. As the flare's drop comes to an end, the field returns back into its darkness state. In the distance, he sees four figures moving hunched over. He leans in and takes aim before sending a small burst of rounds downfield. The rounds zoom across the field as the last rounds in this three-round burst glow before meeting their target. The tracers illuminating the fields as they hover by. Once the gunfire stops, a tree falls over on the other side of the field. Alert now, they sit, waiting for another push on their position. It seems like forever before anything ever happens. They just sit there in silence again, but this time knowing that the Americans will come again. As another flare flies into the sky, they find a fire team taking positions behind the fallen tree on the right flank. The old creek bed alongside the farm field was the only flaw to their position. They knew it. The gun swung around and fired into the tree, ripping it apart. As the bark flies and cracks, the sounds of screams in the distance can be heard before a thunderous crack can be heard, followed by a ping. The machine gun continues to fire until the gun goes empty and there's a short pause to hear the scream stop. Johannes, admiring his work, shakes himself and tells Friedrich to hurry up on the reload. He turns to notice that he is slumped against the wall with a hole drilled into his helmet. The mud and blood in the pool around him as his body still twitches. The cigarette floating in the pool beside him and the half-eaten chocolate bar melting in with the blood. Quickly looking back over the barricade, he notices two fire teams attempting to cross the field to his position. He knows he's about to soon be overran. He freezes for several seconds before grabbing his box of ammunition, remembering that this is no longer about him. He was stationed here to help with the evacuation of civilians and wounded. It was his job to protect these people. He slammed the weapon down over the fresh belt and took aim. As he fires, the rounds fly downfield, and the Americans dive for cover in the open field. The snow and dirt kicks up as the beast rips apart the ground and flesh of its enemies alike. They start to return fire as flashes from their muzzles illuminate the world around them. The once dark, quiet field now is abrupt with bright light and screams. As he clears a jam, Johannes yells out at the Americans, "Go away, you murderous bastards, leave me alone." He continues to fire his weapon when he can hear a response in German, but the gun is too loud for him to hear the exact words. He stops firing long enough to attempt to hear the words spoken. "Hey, stop firing! You are outnumbered! You will be treated with hospitable care." The American's words almost sounded like a school child attempting to speak the language for the first time, but was reassuring to him. He stands up and puts his hands in the air. He takes a quick glance at his dead friend, climbing out of his foxhole towards the American line. "I am coming out, hold your fire," he yells out. He can see that the Americans still have all intent on killing him if needed. He can hear the man he was talking to yell out in his native tongue before a bullet rips through his shoulder and chest. The impact knocks him backwards as he trips over the sandbags back into his foxhole he was laying in. As he lies there bleeding and immobilized, another flare flies overhead, illuminating the scene that was pitch black from the mud. Before him is a lifeless gaze from Friedrich. As he lies there, all he can hear is the yells of the American soldiers above him. He can't tell the context of what they are saying, but it sounds as though one of them is getting excited while the man he spoke to is now angrily shouting. After a few moments, he finally fades into a sleep. In the blackness of his sleep, he can feel something tugging at his breast pocket, followed by the sounds of crumpled paper. Sergeant First Class Johannes. Quite a life you had there," he can hear coming from some mysterious voice above him. Before he can hear American voices, the man speaks back to the voices before sliding the paper back into Johannes's pocket. As he goes to snap the pocket shut, Johannes musters enough energy to grab the man's arm. Where he couldn't exactly tell, but it felt like the forearm. He can hear gasps and voices about him before something he can actually understand would ever be uttered. "Don't worry, Johannes, you're safe. We're gonna take you back to town, and you'll be fixed like new. See the girl you left behind return to life as you knew it. His eyes opened to see between him and Friedrich is an American with a blue and red patch with two A's lining it. The kid looks almost as young as Friedrich, and almost as innocent. Sorry, but my friend is very eager to kill after training. After hearing what happened over in Normandy, we had to straighten him out. You won't have to worry about him now. Johannes looks past the kid and notices four other black figures moving about in the shade. Everything is just so blurry, almost like a dream. Details so hard to make. All he could think was the evacuation, Friedrich going home, two of which he now had his answers. What time is it? He asked the American before the soldier looks at his watch. No, no, 9. I want to see the time in my coat pocket. The American opens the locket watch and smiles. It's 4:15 in the morning. He sets the locket down on his chest so he can see it, and Johannes smiles. The American probably mistaking his look for admiration of the woman. Inside, all Johannes could think was that everything Friedrich and he did was not in vain. The trucks would soon be gone when the Americans get there. It was at this point that he knew the evacuation was done and the war was over for him.